Hi class, today we're going to be talking about Benito Juarez in Mexico. Benito Juarez is another figure very important in the Mexican history. He's the first person to be fully indigenous in ancestry to become a governor of a Mexican state. He was an orphan and he left his small Zapotec village at the age of 12 to the city of Oaxaca in the south of Mexico. He put on European clothes, they say, with a black frock coat, which I'll show you pictures in a little bit, and learned Spanish. He studied the law and practiced law in Oaxaca, Mexico. He once represented, they say, a poor villager against a supposedly abusive priest that landed him in jail. But you will see later on, Benito Juarez was not for the rights of the indigenous people. He was only interested in his own self-advancement. He will see he will become a very good friend of the U.S. Eventually, he was elected to the state legislature and National Congress and served 5 years as the governor of Oaxaca. But Juarez left his, identity, Zapotec identity, and they say he left it behind and he started wearing this long black coat and looking European, right? He did not represent the interests of the Zapotec in particular, nor the indigenous people as a group. To call him an India was an insult to him, and he sometimes they say they used to wear rice powder to make his skin look lighter, to lighten his dark complexion. So this is a picture of Benito Juarez, and you can see he wear that long, with the tail in the back, that kind of suit, and that's the way he looked all the time. Uh, and I guess sometimes they say he used to wear rice powder on his face to look more white. To many Mexicans, Benito Juarez represented the promise of liberalism, how he could rise from the bottom, right? Like he was an indigenous who rose to a high position. The first decree of liberal reform was the Juarez Law from 1855, and this law attacked military and ecclesiastical fueros. So there he was against the military and the fueros, the exemptions that they used to give to the clergy. The Lerdo law came in 1856, a year later after Juarez law, and he struck at the church to sell off, all those vast properties. But its secondary effect was that it was putting in jeopardy the communal lands where the indigenous people lived in the villages. So actually, some of the indigenous people will rise against those laws because they liked the setting where they had those communal lands and they could live, surrounded by the, church leader. So you will see all this conflict rising later on. So we have the Juarez Law in 1855 that attacked the military and the ecclesiastical fueros, the exemptions that they gave to the clergy. And the Lerdo Law was the one that made the Mexican church sell the properties, right, that they owned, because there were too many properties that they owned. Distributing village lands into individual families, like we said, they thought will motivate people to work harder. But many of the indigenous villagers believed that communal lands really benefited them. And they joined decent people who are the European, or the white people, and other conservatives under the banner of religion and fueros. The reform lasted only a few years. Conservative general stopped the presidency and dissolved the Congress in 1858, and then a civil war will erupt. The reformers chose Benito Juarez to command their forces, and the conservatives had the army, but liberals had the popular support. So Benito Juarez government soon took over Mexico City, okay, which is the liberal side. The war bankrupted the Mexican state, and Juarez suspended all the foreign debt payments. In France, Spain, and Britain really retaliated by collectively occupying Veracruz, and you will see a French invasion happening in Mexico. Um, the defeated Mexican conservatives, remember the liberals won with Benito Juarez, so the conservatives were really sour and they reached for a monarch. They wanted to bring a king. And Napoleon III wanted to expand in Latin America. So, it's very interesting how the term Latin America was invented by the French during these years, because they wanted to say that people of Latin descent, okay, to make it seem like France and Latin America, I guess, Spanish America, had the same past, right? Coming from Latin, because, the Romans brought the language, and from Latin you have French, Spanish, Portuguese, and all that. So they wanted to have a common ground. So they invented the term Latin America to show the sharing of the culture and the origins of France. Very interesting. And the emperor of Mexico was Maximilian, was a well-intentioned man from the Habsburg dynasty, from Austria, I guess, kind of interesting. And he came with good intentions, but Mexico hated him. They didn't want a foreigner ruling for them. The French troops invaded Mexico in 1862, and Maximilian became emperor after 2 years. It really fueled like a nationalist reaction because they wanted a foreigner out. On Independence Day, he had such good intentions. He wanted to be patriotic to Mexicans and all that. He did a pilgrimage to the church where, Father Hidalgo rang the bell, remember? Just making everybody join forces against Spain, and began the fight of independence in 1810. So he rang the bell, and he was wearing a sarape. Sarape in English, you say serape, I guess. But people prefer the Benito Juarez, who never helped the indigenous people and wore rice powder, and they thought he was more nationalist as compared to Maximilian, who was dressed as a mariachi, but they believed he was a foreigner, like a European. So it's kind of interesting, that irony of all this, how they're dressed. You have the indigenous dress with European clothes, and the European dress with the indigenous clothes. And I'll put a little video later on. It's very interesting about Maximiliano and Carlota. It tells you a little bit of the story, how he came to Mexico. Juarez found a powerful ally with the United States. So the United States becomes a very good friend of Juarez. And Napoleon III attacked during the Civil War in the US. But when in 1865 it ended, US came to aid Juarez. So his aid increased, and Napoleon decided to withdraw from Mexico. So the US helped the French, I guess, Mexico get rid of the French from Mexico. Maximilian stayed in Mexico, and he was captured and executed. And when he was being executed, his last words were, "Viva Mexico!" which is kind of interesting. And his wife, Empress Carlota, returned to Europe, but went crazy, they say. So if you go to Mexico City today, you can go visit El Castillo de Chapultepec, which is where Maximilian and Carlota lived. Beautiful, beautiful, castle in the top of the hills. So you should go visit that. Benito Juarez returned to Mexico City as a president. And the Mexican conservatives that had disgraced themselves, remember, they were so sour that they brought in a French king and a French invasion into Mexico. They will never rule Mexico again.